I understand we've started, is that correct?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to start as usual by thanking two people who have made what I'm doing possible. Anyway, thanks to Tatiana, right, and to Bibi, which stands for Basic Basic. And if you know about Dianetics, you know that Basic meant that this was once upon a time in 1950. Basic meant that there was an engram that was like the basic engram, the great grandfather and mother of all engrams. And if you could get enough of what we call charge and things off the case to where you could find and run the basic engram, you'd have a clear, because it was from that engram that everything else was an addition that made what we call the reactive mind. You all know that, so I'll go on to something else at this point. In one of my most recent talks, lectures, sermons, whatever they should be called, I mentioned the idea of something called a help clear. And that seemed to go over rather well. There were a couple of things I left out. When Ron gave that lecture in the winter of 1957-58, which was a very wild winter in Washington, D.C., meaning a lot of snow, big storms, very cold. A lot of people got sick, too. But anyway, he was giving this staff meeting, and in the meeting, he informed us that he had come up with an idea for a clear procedure that embodied the best of both Dianetics and Scientology in theory, and that the organization was going to get back on its feet, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, back on its feet, and we were going to do some really good things with the subject of help and the subject of clearing. But he said although clearing has always been a very popular idea, and he ought to know because his first book, Dianetics and Modern Science of Mental Health, was about how to get clear. And that book, actually, in 1950, made the bestseller lists, and I've seen copies of it in homes all over the country where I've been, where people back then read the book and were pretty impressed with it. Anyway, he said, we're going to really work on selling the idea of clear again. We're going to make it popular, and we are actually going to deliver it, too. But he said, I want you to know that what's most important, at least to me, in all of this is clear is okay, even though I hold the idea that a trained auditor is superior to a clear, because an auditor can make clears. An auditor knows how to rehabilitate the state of clear. So I put being a trained auditor who knows how to really audit as being a senior state of beingness to a clear. But the other important thing is, although we're working in the direction of clearing people, most importantly is I want to make something called OTs. And by OT, he meant operating Thetan, which translated into English is a spiritual being who is capable of doing something, capable of creating effects, capable of communicating and moving, shaking and moving things in the world. Not necessarily to do as Hitler or Genghis Khan wanted to do and conquer the world, but could make effects, could do things, who was capable and conscious and not always concerned with how is my body doing. It was like, I can do things and I know I can do them. So he was very interested in the state of OT, operating Thetan. In those days, that meant to me how operational or how capable is a person, a human being or a spiritual being. That's what's meant by operating. What can they do in the sense of competence, in the sense of having skills and abilities? And that's what I thought it was all about. It wasn't like walking through walls or going to distant universes or never having another feeling of unpleasantness in your life had nothing to do with anything regarding the state of clear. It had to do with how capable you were as a person, as a being, to do things in this world, recognizing that you have a mortal, easily harmed or killed body, that you only have a certain number of years usually in which to accomplish things, and there's a lot of things that can grow and oppose you when you try to make things happen. And how operational are you in the face of that? That's what he was interested. And I noticed as working in his organizations and then possibly even in the Sea Organization, one of the things that he was really concerned with was getting people to see how really capable they are of doing something. Oh, I could never do that. Ron was like, put that aside and just do it. Stop inventing, finding ideas, coming up with reasons why, and a million excuses for being incapable. And, you know, when he said do it, he meant do it. Like, if he wanted you to dive down and clean the hull of an old ship and you'd never done any diving before, don't tell him you couldn't do it. Just put on the diving gear and go down and clean the bottom of the boat, come up again and say, you know what? I could do it. And I'm feeling pretty strong now because I'm finding out that I can do things that I never believed I could do before. And that's one of the neat things about clearing up engrams for a person. Engrams are all things that tell you what you can't do, where you can't go, what you can't be, etc. And if you get the right ones, you're going to get somebody that can operate in this world. So yes, clear, a help clear, a wonderful pen, determined clear, who could do all kinds of wonderful things and help people, marvelous. But in the final analysis, as a human being or a spiritual being on this planet, in this universe, the bottom line is, how operational are you? And that's the thing that you can use different things both in Dianetics and Scientology to improve on enormously. Look at me and take my word for it. I have become, at different times in my life, so operational it would be embarrassing to brag about it. That may not be the case at the moment. My equipment is getting ancient and it's harder for me to oil it and get it moving, and those are the excuses. I could still be quite operational, and so can you. Don't buy any ideas about limitation. That used to be what Ron talked about. Don't let anybody, including yourself or whatever you have in your head, tell you you can't do it or you can't be it or you can't have it. Anyway, when Dianetics and Scientology are well used, all that stuff gets knocked out of the way, and you end up with a person who's ready to confront life. Yes, a lot of life, a lot more than they were used to confronting, and doing something. That's where the fun is. Okay? At this point, I'm going to take a short break and see if I can do any more.